Ready? Thank you. Let's open with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you that we're able to gather here in freedom on your holy Sabbath. We hope that you feel like you want to join us. That you would prefer to be with us than anyone else. We want to welcome you into our hearts and our minds. And we thank you that even though we cannot see, there are holy angels here with us who are interested in what we say and what we think. For all these blessings, I thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. So we've been speaking about organisation. And we began our story, I think we said somewhere around 94, 96. 1994, 96. And we've come all the way up to 2019. So in 2018-19, we had ordained several people as either elders or Bible workers. There are a couple people that we missed. And I just want to acknowledge them, unless anybody else remembered some more names. So one was Wesley from Brazil. And I think that was 19. And also in 19 was Gabriel, I believe. Great. Some of these people, they were ordained into their roles after they had been working in that role or fulfilling it for some time before. For others, the ordination and the beginning of their ministry was at the same time. So as an example, Elder Shaquetta, she began her work as an elder from the beginning of her ordination. But someone like Wesley or Gabriel, they were already in the role of elders before they were ordained. And I've changed the date for Elder Manjit to 19 because we had the date wrong. I had the date wrong. I've put 19 here. Someone said it's 18, but I'm going to leave 19 at the moment until someone else corrects me. Okay, so even though we've discussed all of these people and this history, we're here in France together. And so I'm running all of this through a thread of the French connection, the French world. So I'm not trying to suggest when we discuss this subject about personal qualifications or being led by God, I'm not trying to suggest that this is only referring to two individuals. These are repeating patterns. This is an experience that we see happening in many dynamics, many ministries. Happens often in families. And if I was to say this happens in family, what model do you call that? Nepotism, someone said. I was thinking patriarchy. Almost all families run on a patriarchal system. Why? Because we are all brought up to believe that the leader of the household, that role is dependent upon what? Personal qualification or ordained by God? We all know the answer to that. Men are the heads of the household based upon what? Their capability or God's will? We know it's this one, and we know it's wrong. Even in a family that runs on patriarchy, they know if the wife, if it's a heterosexual marriage, that if she's better qualified, some roles, some jobs from the husband. Because families won't function well in this patriarchal model if it's run properly that way. So that's just one example that this struggle that's happening in LGC that we spoke about touches all of your lives. Something that we fight against. Now, in the last presentation, when I said we have these four people, I haven't written the fourth one, it's USA. And I said that they will choose people underneath them based upon a certain criteria. Their belief system, worldview. It's either that they believe in some kind of spiritual experience or some human experience. And I asked the question, I can't remember which one I asked first, but I asked two. Is it good or bad? And which one did I follow? So, from this perspective that we're just talking about now, you can see where the movement is headed. A radical feminist organization, one that's based upon equality, cannot use this model that people rise up based upon some experience or some message that they have. It has to be based upon different criteria. You just compare and contrast with patriarchy or matriarchy. So I hope that's clarified this issue, polarized it in your minds, that it's not just really my agenda, my preference, it's the right thing to do. And this should make us reevaluate how we interact with one another. And one of the ones that I think is at least relatively important, if not one of the most important things, is how we bring up children. Because most of us bring up children in this way, with some kind of ideology or theology, as opposed to bringing up children who are trained to be good humans. It's a dangerous way to bring up children this way, because it inculcates a patriarchal mindset in them. Because we all know, or should know, patriarchy is more than just men suppressing women's rights. It's much more insidious than that. During lunch, just before this meeting, someone, a friend of mine, sent me an interesting fact. They said, it's interesting you're doing this presentation on organisation today. Why? Does anybody have any thoughts? So, Shemaine knows. When? So, we'll go to the year first. So, we're in the year 2020, and we're in the month December. And you know what the date is? 30th. So, it's to the very day that we're talking about the same subject 3 years on. I thought that was nice. And this was the German camp meeting by the title of Ropes. Hold on to the ropes, yes. Good. So I only said that because Tamina's with us, whose camp meeting that was. And if you're so inclined, if you're inclined to think this way, it can't be a coincidence that she's here today. because I think it's the first time you've come, at least for a long time, to a French camp meeting. It's on this day, on this subject. Okay, so we're in 2019. I'm having a discussion with Shemaine. We're in 2019. I'm having a discussion with you. And to try to inspire her about her work, her role, without using this methodology here, this God-ordained one, is the study of 30 years of preparation. LGC is still fully functioning. So how long does it take, or what year does GC dissolve? So it takes 2 years from this point. I'm not saying anything special happens in 19 with respect to LGC. I don't want to get too personal, but I will. There are two issues that they're struggling with. Not all of them. Do you know what the two issues are? It's in 19. It's LGBTQ rights. And what else? I'm going to put it women's rights. And those things happen back to back. And what's interesting for me is that God cares so much for each of us that both of those issues, both of those incidents, they don't pass without some kind of acknowledgement. So the person is aware that they're failing in real time. And many of you were at both of these events when they happened. One happened in France and one happened in Germany. So I'm not saying this to accuse anybody, but what I want us to see, there are these repeating patterns, these cycles. And if it's happening to people that you know, it's happening to you. And you can't escape your destiny. Because your destiny is recorded on these lines, on these dates. And you might be a tiny blip in 19 or in 18, be so tiny, your experience, you might not have an awareness that you're part of this experience, this line. Just like this person didn't realize it then. They just thought this was time and chance. But when you look back, you see how their personal experience becomes a prophetic experience. There's a phrase in English. It says the higher they are, the harder they fall. Which means the more important you are, when you fall, it's more painful. But we all will fall, or we all will not fall. Whether it's a big fall or a small one. So, people don't see the time. Some people do, most people don't. But in 19, I'm going to say to me, it's clear the direction in which the French ministry is heading. Which means the leadership structure, the direction in which that is heading. Whether or not people are willing to accept or acknowledge what's happening, four years later, I want us to see what was happening back in 19 as a theoretical line, which is just mathematics, and how it overlays or relates to people's personal experience, and how God lifts or raises people up and brings them down. Or some people would say we do the damage to ourselves. So without going into the intricacies of this, the test of LGBTQ and women's rights, many of you know what I'm referring to here. In France, you do. You should now be able to look back and say, yes, I can see what happened for what it really was. And for those of you who were at the School of the Prophets in 2019, and several of you were, if you go back in your memory and look over those experiences, these are not human fights. These are not interpersonal problems. This is the everlasting gospel doing its work. But it looks really human. And if you can see that in this story, I want you to see it with your spouse, with your family members. Parents, children, and your fellow members. We're all experiencing the tensions of human relationships. And when you look back over your life, if you're part of God's kingdom, perhaps even if you're not, you'll see that your human interactions have an element that is supernatural. Or we'll frame it in the following way: the everlasting gospel. What happens in 2020 that shakes the world? COVID. But it's not called COVID-20, it's called what? It's called COVID-19. So I'm not trying to stretch a point, but COVID has an impact and has a relationship to this movement's work. Whether it's God doing something positive or Satan trying to interfere and damage with the work or damage the work of this movement. Both stories are real and legitimate. COVID didn't come in 18 or 20. It came in 19 and it did a work. I leave it to you to figure out which work that it did. It's like a coin, or a sword, it's double-edged. It's had its benefits and it's had its real damage that it's done. So I've marked 20 because that's when COVID touched us. Because that's when the lockdowns began. And those lockdowns have really harmed the ability of this movement to function properly. And we're only just coming out of that now. People might have their different dates. And as we look back, we'll see, depending on what story, what are good dates or relevant ones and which are not. So someone told me that they think that this date that I'm going to put here, which marks the coming out of this movement, this is not a waymark on a normal line. Don't misunderstand, please. But they've suggested it's May this year. And what happened in May this year? Lisa's wedding. I, I, I was waiting, but she was thinking about something else. So this time period, this 3 years, if I can call it that, has crippled this movement's ability to move forward, I think. And in many ways, the development of its organization has been put on hold. And so things have happened in the background, small things that haven't affected our lives in an obvious way and hasn't been announced. But seeing as we've come out of lockdown and in-person meetings are beginning, the work of organisation is going to begin to regain its importance. Before I move on, I want to go back to Terry, the Bible worker, because I know my two friends there were objecting with this date. And title. So we just want to add that in what year? Do you know? Oh, one moment. Let her speak. Go ahead.
Je pense que c'est 2020.
I think it's 2020.
Okay, I'm going to go for 21. And Elder Terry is ordained as an elder. So I want one more piece of information. So we're current up to date with Elder Terry now. And she had been doing her work for many years before she was ordained as a Bible worker and then as an elder. So we went from 3. We'll leave the United States for the moment. Africa is a large continent. And so in 2018, it was decided that that Africa would be divided into 2 parts. And Manjit was appointed continental leader for, I'll just say, half of Africa. So Olatubo had half of Africa and Canada, and Manjit had the other half of Africa. And the following year, in 19, he was ordained as an elder. He did that work for several years. And then there was a level of reorganization that occurred. And he stepped down from the role. These 3 names, myself, Marco, and Tabo, we've spoken about them as elders. 2016, but they were also continental leaders at the same time. And I'm not going to discuss the difference between an elder and a continental. Maybe in a Q&A or at a different time. So Manjit was made a continental leader in 18. Ordained as an elder in 19. And I can't remember the date, but either between 21, I think, and we'll go with 21, 22. No, I'm going to go say 2021. He stepped down from that role. And I don't know if you all know, but Emma is his wife, and she was commissioned to take over. So she's now the continental leader for half of Africa. We refer to it as East Africa. So has now taken the role from Manjit to keep you up to date. So that was never publicly announced, and that's just been an oversight on my part. So coming back to the story as it relates to France, we've spoken about this journey that Shemaine has gone on and LGC has as well. And to try to bring this story to a conclusion, sometime last year, this story about the work of being a continental leader, what their role, what their work is, became a topic of conversation again. And the reason why this has coming to the surface is because people in France haven't understood clearly what Shemaine's role is. And there are people outside of Africa who haven't known what Emma's role is. And some people don't even know that Elder Manjit currently has an organisational role. So I want to take the opportunity this weekend to bring not only yourselves but the whole movement up to date. I think it's appropriate to do that now, especially as I was reminded of this event 3 years ago to the day. As we head into 2024, we have an international meeting next year, as you're all aware of. And not only in the United States, in other countries, but particularly in the United States, it's their election year. In preparation of all that's coming ahead of us, I think it's important that we all know what the structure of our organization is. So I want to clarify that for several years now, Shemaine has been fulfilling the role of continental leader for the French-speaking world. And Emma has been doing that for East Africa. And it's a neglect on my part for not announcing that or bringing it to your attention earlier. Neither of those two people have yet been ordained as elders. But that's just a matter of time. And I want to just speak about one more. So we had all of these areas, and I've kept on leaving, I keep on point here, I don't know why, but the United States. So you know that in 2019, Chiquetta was made an elder of the United States. Like Canada, the United States is treated as a continent, even though it's a country. It's just a large country, so it's just been done that way. So what we haven't announced in the movement, which I'm doing now, today, is that Elder Chiquetta has stepped down from her role as elder. And we have not yet appointed a replacement. Elder Chiquetta was on, in the movement we call it sabbatical. I think in the world they call it extended sick leave. And it ended up being for almost a year. So we'll say the whole of 2022. And there wasn't an announcement made because it wasn't planned that she would be away for that long. So we had an acting leader take her place while she was on sick leave or sabbatical. And that person is Kathy McGraw. And that might be someone that you're not familiar with. So I'll put her here. I'll put her surname because we've got several Kathys in the movement. And I know most of you aren't familiar with this person. So Elder Chiquetta was supposed to return back to work at the beginning of this year. Which she did. But when she took up her role, she began to struggle in her health again and decided that she could not do this job. And so we haven't yet appointed Kathy McGraw as her replacement. But for the past, I'll say 18 to 20, we'll say 18 to 24 months, she's been the acting continental leader for the United States. So in summary, during the period of COVID, 20 to 23, there has been substantial changes in the organization of this movement. With respect to the leadership. Shemaine has had the role of continental leader for quite some time now. Emma has taken that role up for quite some time too, as has Kathy. So Emma replaced Manjit. Kathy has replaced Shaquetta. This is only a temporary role. And Shemaine has replaced. I don't know what to say the replacement is because there wasn't an individual person before. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you today. We've got some time left. And I want to just leave it open if anybody has questions. No questions? Ah. Mhm.
Fonctionne. Ah, c'est bon, ok. So I would have a question. Is there now that traveling has started again? For the three people that you mentioned, will there be an ordaining? Will there be an ordaining?
So we haven't had formal discussion about this yet. But there's no reason why Emma and I haven't got Shemaine's name there, but Emma and Shemaine should not be ordained. There's no reason for that not to happen. So it's my hope that it will happen next year. Kathy won't be ordained because she's not. It's only an acting role at the moment. And this list was people that were ordained. We have other Bible workers throughout the world, several of them, and I haven't put all of their names on there. And we have other ministry leaders whose names are not there either. Ah, yes, someone just reminded me. I'm going to take, I'll put it here. We have had 2 other ordinations as elders. Someone will correct me, but I'm going to put 2023. And you probably don't know these people. It's Doreen and Gracious. And they are 2 members, 2 women from South Africa. South Africa. Thank you for reminding me of that. That was Charity.
Alors, my question. T'as pas saisi l'humour. Adieu. Alors, ma question est, puisque Chimène aura la casquette d'ancien aujourd'hui, aura la
So
casquette.
since Shimen will have the role of continental leader today, okay.
Bah, alors, elles viennent de me donner une précision là et j'aimerais qu'on me fasse qu'on me donne une explication concernant un ancien continental. Est-ce que tous les anciens sont continentaux déjà?
I would, and they offered me some clarity, but I would like to know if all elders are continental leaders. C'était ça.
C'est-à-dire, où vas-tu situer Chimène? Est-ce que c'est parmi les trois là?
So where are you? Same level as the three names up top? Shimen.
Can I rub this off? Sure. So, we have elders in our movement at different levels. We have good elders and bad elders, depending on how we want to define good.
Confirme.
I think most people in this room, if I can use the term, are ex-Adventists. And if you've been an Adventist for any length of time, you've passed through the hands of several pastors. And you know for yourself there have been good pastors and bad ones. Ones that take care of you and ones that don't. Ones that are good organizers and ones that are completely disorganized. And ones where they put you asleep and ones they really excite you. So we have the same issues in our movement with our, I'll say our elders because they're not pastors. Before I forget, just want to put one more name here. This is Elder Marshall. And he's from Zimbabwe and he's in 2018 as well. And someone says that this should be 18 for Wesley and Gabriel. So we have Elbo. We have Kathy. We have Marco. We have Emma. We have Shemaine and Terry. So there are 6 continental leaders. And the areas of responsibility are that's not South Africa, that's Southern Africa and Canada. United States, South America and Central America. I'll just put Mexico, but there are other countries. So Emma has East Africa. I'll put the UK down. So Shemaine has France. I just put the French-speaking world, if that's the respectful way of saying it. And Terry has Oceania, which is basically Australia, Fiji, and New Zealand. And underneath each of these people, depending on their situation and their size, they have ministries underneath them. So, for instance, for Southern Africa, there are several countries, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, etc. And in each of those localities, they will have a ministry. And depending on the location, they will have a Bible worker and an elder. But not in every country. So I'll just stop there and allow you to tell me which parts of your question I haven't answered yet. Because I might not have answered all of it, I think.
Alors, peut-être que ma question de départ était quelles seraient alors ces fonctions. Est-ce que ces fonctions seront décuplées, doublées, ou bien est-ce qu'il y aurait des délégations, etc.
So my question would be, would her missions and work be multiplied? Would it be delegated? Pour Chimène, c'est ça, j'imagine, for Chimène.
Do I need to repeat that? Okay, that's fine. So the simple answer is there's going to be no change of her work, her workload, and her responsibility moving forward than there has been in the past. There's no change. So everything that she's been doing for the last, we'll say, 2 years, she'll continue to do. You won't see any change. So I want to give you the opportunity to ask me a further question if I still haven't answered what you want clearly. It's good? Okay. Go ahead.
Moi, j'ai une question par rapport aux consécrations que vous avez parlé de Emma et Chimène.
So regarding the ordaining that you talked about for Emma and Chimène.
Alors, moi, c'est toujours aimé savoir, est-ce que c'est les anciens continentaux qui prennent la décision ou c'est Parminder et Tess? J'ai pas
Who takes the decision for that? Is it the continental leaders or Parminder and Tess?
At the moment, Elder Tess is not taking any movement responsibilities. But if she was, then obviously she would, I won't say obviously, she would be part of that decision-making process. Because she's on sabbatical, which is sick leave, you've all, I presume, watched her video, her testimony of her experience. I think we all have a realization that she is not well. And I have no visibility at the moment when she would return to work. So organizational decisions like this, which have already been delayed for too long, I don't see the reasonableness in delaying making those decisions any longer. So that's part one of your question. Part two, what may not be visible to the members, but which should be abundantly clear to ministry leaders at the country level and the continental level, is the way is that the decision-making process that we have in this movement I think I would say has fundamentally changed. Others may say it's just been modified. But no major decisions and ordaining people to this level is a major decision. No major decision like that. Let me rephrase that. I would not take a decision like that on my own. So yes, they would be consulted, but we're only talking about the ordination bit, because all of these 6 people have already been working together as a team closely with each other. They all understand that they're continental leaders. And that dynamic, that structure has been in place for over a year, longer than that. So the only thing that people would comment on is that they should or should not be ordained. And all the people that I work with are reasonable people. And I don't know how you understand the word reasonable, but it's a legal term. It's a legal concept. And I think it's reasonable that the people that we're speaking about would be ordained. And I use that in the legal term, not just my opinion. And whenever we have a disagreement, or a difference of opinion, we discuss those differences. And if I say 1 year, all the decisions that we've made during that 1 year, we have never had a majority decision. We've had unanimous decisions. And if people, for those of you who know me, you know that that's my preferred way of operating. Very similar to the EU, I guess. You get one troublemaker and they stop the plans of the other 20 plus countries. Did I answer your question? Good. Tamina? As Tamina's getting her microphone, someone asked me what happened in May 2023. Who wants to answer? Our continental leader, would you like to answer? Good.
I'm not sure, but I think it was the first time that Elder Parminder came back in France.
What can we say? It's when I begin traveling, and this is my first place that I come to. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't planned that I was going to come in any meaningful way. And it certainly wasn't planned that from that moment, my calendar would be full. And I would live out of a suitcase again. But something seems to have changed. I don't think I'm the only person that feels that. Oh, Tamina, sorry, I forgot.
My observation in the past was that organization has happened as it was needed. My question is there a plan for the future? Like, for example, a 5-year plan, is there any goal where we are heading to?
So the simple answer to that question is no. Whenever I teach a subject, there are various layers to that subject. Some are on the surface and some much deeper. Some I talk about immediately at the beginning, and some take many classes or many studies, which ends up being many months. To bring to the surface. I know that that frustrates people. And I'm not here to defend it or justify it. And I apologize that you get frustrated with that. But let me ask this question. So Tamina said, is there some strategic planning, 2 years, 5 years, 10-year planning, that type of thing? "15 months ago, I began to, maybe 16, I began to discuss a subject. What was that subject?" September 22, I think. Okay, so no one said anything, but Shemaine said, "Where are the Levites?" So either I deceived everybody or everybody got deceived. But everybody thinks in 2022, I'm talking about Levites, and then we can say of Nethinims. What's the real subject that's been begun to be discussed back then? Because that's not the correct title. What is the correct title? Who are the 144,000? No. One word answer. It's really simple. No.
Are we wrong? Would it be are we wrong?
What began here and is continuing today? Organization. This study on the Levites and Nethinims, sure, it's about evangelism and the other answers that I got, but it's about organization. And this movement has had a misunderstanding of its role, of its function. And I brought the subject of the Levites to demonstrate that. Now, remember, there's many layers of prophecy that we have to grapple with. So the answers that I just got were not wrong answers. They were correct answers. But I asked this specific question 15, 16 months after the subject begins. I asked it today to give me a new title. And if you know how I think, I don't ask trick questions. I just ask the same question over and over again differently. So if I ask 10 questions today, your answer for every one should be organization. Because I want to show you how organization impacts our lives differently. We can have a theme or a study that stretches months that all come together with the common thread. The reason we can't organize or prepare 5 years with like a 5-year plan like most secular companies or organizations can is because they know their business. They know their market. And this movement doesn't. And the reason why we discussed the Levites and Nethinims was just one small example, or big one, to demonstrate we actually have a very shallow understanding of end time prophecy. Even though we know more about prophecy than any other humans on this planet. We couldn't have discussed this subject before 21, because people would not have believed it. They would say you're fighting against the lines. But once the waymark has happened, and we're well into the history of the harvest of the Levites, then comes the time, the opportunity for introspection to say, we don't understand this line properly. Because in that dispensation, things are not happening as we expect them to. And that's a really shallow answer to Tamina's question of why we can't plan ahead. Because it would be too dangerous to. We had plans and ideas to do various projects. And they were all geared up. They were all set in motion to prepare for thousands of new people to enter the movement. Can you imagine how much money and time we would have wasted if we had done that? So that's why I'm cautious about not making long-term plans. This structure that we have has been in place since 2016, which is 7, 8 years. It's changed slightly. The names have changed. We've had some refinement. But the major changes have been at this country level underneath. There's been very little change at the top. Just want to add one more point. I've got 6 continental leaders here. And no one's asked me where one of the continents are. And which one's missing? Europe. So who's the continental leader of Europe? You can see it now that it's pointed out. That you probably would have missed. So there's Europe, and it's me. I have a part-time job, being continental leader for Europe. And parts of South America. So I share some responsibility with Marco. He has some countries and I have some. So I'm pretty sure that's everything now. And you're all up to date. We're at time, but I'm happy to field more questions. Yeah, 5 minutes.
So because we are in France, I would like to have maybe clarity between the difference of Ximen's and Maurice's role of continental leader and ministry elder. Because now you've clarified Ximen's role as a continental leader. I see that it's organization in terms of French-speaking world. So what is then Maurice's role? Is it like the elder we knew of in the church, visiting members, etc., or is it like Ximen? Or does Ximen have the same role too?
I've said a few times in this discussion, in these meetings, that while we have a template or a pattern that is pretty uniform across all of these regions, each locality has its peculiarities. So your question would be, this country here that comes under Elder Tabo's continental leadership is South Africa. And South Africa has how many elders? 2. Good. That was just a test question, if you remembered. Does anybody remember their names? Good. Doreen and Gracious. So, Marilyn, could ask, because it's your question. How would you, I know you don't know these people, you don't know Tabo, and you don't know them. How would you describe their relationship with respect to what work they do?
Normally, they should work together. The 2 elders, Doreen and Gracious, should report what happened in the ministry to Tabo. The two elders in South Africa are more linked to the community and to the ministry compared to Tabo, who doesn't live in the country. But in our case, Ximen and Maurice are in the same place.
Thank you for your answer. So, if I can paraphrase what I think you've said, the relationship between these elders is quite well defined. They have similar roles. These elders, because they're on the ground, they work closely with the members, and they report back to Elder Tabo. And Tabo then gives them guidance or assistance or instructions. They work as a team, but they are his ears and his eyes locally. So that's part one. And then, because this is a group of countries that they're not identical, but they have similar needs. They're geographically very similar. They're all on the same continent. Whatever decisions or structures or issues he agrees with South Africa, he can implement with Zimbabwe and Zambia. So there can be a level of uniformity across his region. So they're not all doing different things in different ways. I think you'd agree that that would be good. So what happens? We've got Africa, that's fine. But what happens about Canada? Because he lives in Canada, so he's much closer to the people. And because of his geographical location to the members, the way he relates to the Canadian ministry will be different to the way he relates to the South African ministry. You can see that geography does that. So when it comes to Shemaine and Maurice, simplistically, it would operate in this fashion. But it's much more akin to Tabo with Canada. Or Kathy in the United States. The added complexity or subtlety to this is that they don't live in the same country, in the same city. They live in the same house. And it can appear for those, I took out the just in that they don't just live in the same country, they live in the same house. So theoretically, it should all be the same. There should be, Marie should be dealing with the local members. And Shemaine should say, it's not my business. You do that. And report back to me. But you know that relationships don't work that way. And it's not the only place that it happens that way. It's not identical. But for instance, Elder Marco is married. Many of you have met his wife, whose name is good, Solange. They work closely. I would call them a team. But she has no organizational responsibility. She has no organizational authority. But they share the work together. I don't know how you view that. but I view that as a benefit. So for me, the closeness that Shemaine and Maurice have is something that's positive, not negative. Strictly speaking, Shemaine is Maurice's boss. She has been for a long time. 20 years, I don't know. That was a joke, of course. As a continental leader, she has responsibility over him, but they don't work that way together. They've developed a way of working as a team, which I think is positive, not negative. So you might think or say, well, I don't have a clear line of organization. Who am I supposed to speak to? Who is the boss? I look at it differently. I think you're blessed that you can go to either one, that you have two minds now dealing with your paying attention to concerns and issues. And we all know the Bible principle. Two minds are better than one. So I think they're working closely together only is a blessing to each of you and therefore to the movement than something detrimental. Rather than discuss Shemaine's role with respect to Maurice, I want to do it the other way around. All continental or worldwide decisions Maurice is never involved in those and he's never consulted. Now, I don't know what their bedroom talk is. Like, I don't know what it is for all of these other people. But I'm not naive to think that people, married couples, don't talk to one another. They do. So I don't go to these people and say you're forbidden to talk to your spouse. I trust their judgment and their wisdom to know what they can say and what they cannot say to their spouse. So Maurice has no involvement at an international, worldwide level. But Shemaine has decided, the choice that she has made with Maurice, to get, in English they say, to get their hands dirty, to get intricately involved in the work of France. She could be like Tabo or Emma or Terry and say, that's not my job. You do that, Maurice. You do all the visiting and I stay at home. Do my job. But she chooses not to. And I think everyone's blessed by that. I think Maurice is blessed. And I think the members are blessed by that. Just by the concept. I'm not trying to promote Shemaine as a great person. I don't mean it that way. But I think it's a good way of operating. when people in high leadership positions as these are willing to make the time and the effort to deal with individual members. So Shemaine works with Maurice. She doesn't replace him at a national level. At an international level, Maurice is not even in the picture. So I hope that clarifies the situation. Yeah, good. I think we've run out of time. Let's close with prayer. If you have any questions afterwards, either write to me or to Shemaine, and I'll try to address them in future studies. Let's pray. Dear Lord, I want to thank you. These two studies today have been a blessing to me, a confirmation of the great work that you have done in my life, the life of my friends, and the life of the members who are here with us today, in person and online. As each of us gets an awareness, sees our personal role in prophecy, our love for you will only strengthen. I hope that each of us, I hope that I can find purpose and meaning in my life in Jesus' name. Amen.